Welcome back to the Bonsai Builders Podcast. I'm your host, Addison Galambos. We often think of bonsai as an isolated art form, a tree in a pot, kind of standing alone. But as we've heard in previous episodes, the aesthetics of bonsai have a very deep Japanese cultural aspect. My guest today lives in both worlds and has demonstrated an impeccable sense of taste. I've also never heard anyone say a single negative thing about him. So I'm a big fan of him and I'm really excited to have him on the show. And that, of course, is Matthew Gelacio. So he is an up-and-coming, if you don't know him, bonsai artist out of San Diego who spends his days creating full-scale Japanese gardens and his nights crafting beautiful bonsai. So we're going to talk about his kind of dual practice, his foot in both the kind of garden design and bonsai world, and then dive into some kind of philosophical frameworks and kind of his tenets for his practices. So welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me. It's funny you say that because the first time I'm gonna call him out on the Bonsai Builders podcast. The first time I met Ryan was at the Winter Silhouette show like 3 years ago or something, and he comes up to me, he's like, "Are you Matthew Gelacio?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he like paused and he's like, "I hate you." And I was like, "What?" He was like just saying how much he liked my work, and it was so funny. But now we're like best friends. So
I've been trying to get Ryan on the podcast. He said he will. He's like, "Oh, whenever you have a lull and you really need somebody." I'm like, all right, we'll get you on. He's a great guy funny. Though. But yeah, I think we both have a crush on you. So I mean. Your work is just so good. You just have such good taste. So, yeah.
I mean, it definitely took a lot of hard work to get to where I am, and I still feel like I don't know anything.
So, for those who don't know you, can you give us kind of a rundown of like what has been that hard work? Like, when did you get started in bonsai? Or do you have specific focus areas? How have you learned? Would love to kind of start out with that.
Yeah, so I guess I'll give my usual spiel. I started bonsai during COVID as like a hobby. A lot of people were getting into like collecting houseplants, and I wanted to join that. I wanted to be a bandwagoner and join that fad. So I was like looking for houseplants in San Diego, and there was this small local business here in San Diego named Play Bonsai, and I guess they used to sell bonsai but they didn't anymore, and the name just stuck with me. I was like, oh, what if I learned how to do bonsai? So in my quest to find plants for my room, I ended up with a bunch of trees in my backyard, and and I just fell down that rabbit hole of Bonsai Mirai videos on YouTube, Bonsai U videos on YouTube, and I think it wasn't until 2022, 2 years after I had started, that I joined the San Diego Bonsai Club, and that was when I met Fred Miyahara, and he's played such a pivotal role in my bonsai career and has opened so many doors for me. And funny enough, he is also the reason for my start in gardening. While after graduating college, I was looking for a job, and that process was just so long, and in between all the studying and interviews and stuff, I would go out and prune these large Japanese black pines in the garden. His first bonsai student was my boss, Avram Dalton. And Fred sort of pushed Avram to study in Japan. And Fred really wanted him to do a bonsai apprenticeship, but he actually came back and was like, no, I want to do gardening. And I did a job with Avram, I think it had to have been like 3-4 years ago now. And it was just one job, and I remember standing next to him, like working on this black pine pad, and he was next to me, and I was like just so nervous pruning this tree, because it was, I don't know, you just hear so much stuff about him, like how creative a gardener he is, how skilled he is, and it was kind of intimidating. But so that happened, and like that was like the last time I heard from Avram until 2 years ago when he reached out to me and he wanted to assemble this team, and that's how I started doing the garden work I do now. And yeah.
Very cool. So you had these two, it sounds like these two kind of pillars in your, have had huge influence on your life, of Fred and Avram, and the connection between the two. So can you talk a little bit about this team that was assembled, like what Avram's business and your business is?
So Avram was a former apprentice He studied in Shizuoka, Japan, at this garden company, Genten, and he came back and was involved with a lot of big garden projects here in San Diego. And then for the longest time, I think his business was really just him and his dad. And then as his dad got a little older, he was looking for more help. So he found, or I guess it was the opposite way. My former coworker, Ryan Chapman, was moving to San Diego, and he was a bonsai student of Boone's in the Bay Area. So he sort of asked around to see if anyone had any job openings for him. And I think it was Jonas who reached out to Fred and said, like, hey, I got this guy. He has some bonsai experience and he's looking for a job in San Diego. And Fred reached out to Avram. So Ryan became the first piece of that puzzle. And then I think he was working for Avram maybe 2 or 3 months before I joined him. And it was funny because Fred had called me and he was like, hey, Avram's going to reach out to you. I think he needs help with this one pruning job. And I thought it was like just one job. It was one of our nicer trees in San Diego. It's this grouping of 3 large black pines in front of a residence. And I was like, yeah, I know which trees you're talking about. I know it's a big job. So I was like thinking, oh, like he only needs me for this one job. And I get the call from Avram, and then he starts talking about like salary, and I was like, oh, it's more than that. So that was kind of funny. But he had remembered that
accidentally signed up for a job.
Yeah, which was like
full-time job.
Perfect timing, because I mean, I think this was already like 3 years into trying to find a job after graduating. And I joke around. I like to call myself a COVID engineer because I graduated in my living room, literally. And I think like that whole time after trying to find a job, I was doing bonsai stuff on the side. I was doing pruning stuff on the side. And I obviously liked one more than the other. So I chose to go into bonsai and gardening over what I had got my degree in. But
what did you go to school for?
Mechanical engineering.
Oh, no way.
UC Irvine. I know. 2 engineers in the Bonsai Builders podcast.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun finding, engineers is kind of a loaded term nowadays, but that's really cool that what initially drew you to mechanical engineering?
Growing up, I really liked just building things. I had this sort of personal motto that why buy it if you could build it? So I was doing a bunch of like DIY projects in like middle school, high school, working with like wood and PVC. And then I got into cars, and like one of my biggest motivations was owning my dream car, which is a old Datsun S30. And that was like pretty much why I went into engineering. I was like, I want to be able to, acquire the skills so that I can work on this car one day. And it wasn't like I knew I was going to own this car one day, so I had to get an engineering degree. And it was funny because yeah, Marcus, the first time I met Marcus was at the Rendezvous, and I just
Okay.
And I just overheard him talking about it, and I was like, hey, I have one. So
that's what you guys. I was trying to figure out what you guys were talking about. I get it now. And that was distracting you. You're right. You were like, oh man, I need to talk to this person.
I was like super jealous of the conversation they were having.
Do you still have that? Do you still have that life goal in mind? Now you've got the skills, so
I do like, and I bought it right after graduating.
You have one.
I have one.
You've already made the dream a reality. Sorry.
No, yeah, like. It popped up on like Facebook Marketplace after I had graduated, and it was like 5-10 minutes away from me, and I was like, it's destiny, like I have to get it. So I bought it, and but I didn't have a job until 2 years ago. I was waiting like for 3 years, it's sitting out in my driveway, but not being able to work on it because I didn't have the funds to. So now that I have saved up money for my gardening job, I want to start working on it, because it's also sitting in front of where I'm building my garden, and I'm like, it's under a cover, it's all rusty, but I have this garden behind it. Like I have to do both at the same time so that it looks nice all together.
Yeah.
You know?
That's so cool. Okay, so you start working. What could you tell us a little bit about like what you actually do in your day to day? Like what does the garden building involve?
Yeah, so here in San Diego, a lot of our work comes from just pruning. Japanese black pines that have either been planted by Fred or my boss, existing clients, or black pines that have already been planted in the ground by other growers or landscapers. And they reach out to either Fred or the Bonsai Club, and then Fred redirects them to us. So a lot of our jobs, I'd say most weeks are all pruning, except for when we have garden builds, then we'll take a week to prep for that, maybe do pruning here and there, but those come quite rarely. I think one of our biggest jobs here was the tea garden that we built starting last year, and that's been a ongoing project since then. Yeah, most of our day-to-day work is climbing into a ladder and pruning a pine tree.
I've seen you doing some like crazy wall building and like cool bamboo stuff and all these different techniques that I associate at least with Japan. Are you learning those from as well as the Niwaki, the pruning? Are you learning that from Avram, or is that some of that stuff like self-study that you're just kind of figuring out these techniques? Or
it's all from Avram. So like when I started working for Avram, I thought we were only pruning. I thought he only wanted us there for the help doing the pruning. And the next thing you know, we're in Texas working on, the big project there. We're in the Bay Area. But yeah, this is all stuff that he's learned from Japan that he's bringing over to the US. But it's also from his current oyakata, Hiroaki Eto. And he's a garden master from Kyushu, Japan, that has that... The Texas project is his project, and Avram sort of met him around the time that he was doing that, and things just fell into place, and Avram sort of just became Eto-san's like go-to guy here in the States. So Eto-san comes to the US I think every year, and he helps us with our projects, especially like the big ones like the tea garden and the gardens in the Bay Area. So I get to learn a lot of stuff from him as well. I get to practice my Japanese with him a lot, which is nice, but it's always whenever I'm with Eto-san, my Japanese gets better, and then he goes back to Japan, and then it just goes downhill from there.
Yeah.
It's always like that.
I felt like my Japanese was cooking. I mean, this is very mildly saying this, but when I was in Japan, and now like I don't have anybody to speak with, so it's not that it was amazing, but it's, it's not on the upswing currently. Okay, so how many Japanese garden masters are there in the US? Like, is Avram like one of 5 on the West Coast, or is he one of 100? How niche is this pursuit?
I'd say there's only a handful that have done an actual apprenticeship in Japan. But
that's my intuition as well. Like, I don't know of a lot of, like, I think of somebody like Bill Castellan in the Bay Area, for example, who has maybe not the same skill set, but like builds Japanese gardens and has done some work in Japan. But, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of Japanese gardens, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of these Japanese garden masters.
Yeah, what they're trying to figure out is how to bring more Japanese masters to the US. But I really don't think there's that much, like former apprentices like there is in bonsai that are doing the same thing in gardening. There's a lot of people that will go to if they're involved with a garden here in the US, they'll go to their sister city in Japan and do some studying, and then they'll come back and then teach whatever they learned. But I don't think there's a lot of people that have done an actual apprenticeship like Avram has. I could be totally wrong though, but not to my knowledge.
Very interesting. Yeah, it seems like a really cool and unique skill set. How often are you, when your team is working on a garden, are you often bringing in people from Japan to work on the garden as well? Or is it mostly you are the boots on the ground in the US for these jobs?
It's for our jobs at least. It's mostly just us. We try to bring Eto-san whenever we can. Like this year, I think he's coming a bit later than usual, but that's because we were having some visa stuff. Like in Texas, we have another skilled gardener from America, John Powell, was the first intern at Adachi Garden. So he's based out in Texas and he does a lot of garden work in Texas, and he comes and helps on the Texas project. But yeah, like I'd say our main teams, more of like a club, I'd say, starting from Eto-san's gardening company, Suiraku. So we have Suiraku Kai, and that includes people like Bill Costello and John Powell, Avram.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
That's the team we try to get together when we have new projects come along.
Super cool. So before you kind of stumbled into this, did you have any inkling that you were going to end up in this industry, or like, did it just kind of happen by happenstance and now you're in it? I'm just curious how that.
It really did happen just organically. Like, even just last year when I went to Japan for the first time for the Gafuten, I still had intention of doing an apprenticeship in Japan, and I still wanted to become a bonsai professional at that time. But then we started doing more projects, training projects here in the States, and I just wanted to be a part of that and see those projects through because I really did enjoy it. And I was earning an income, a stable income. So it was hard to leave that to pursue bonsai.
To kind of restart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get a little bit deeper into your split loves here of bonsai and gardening. I'm wondering, have you kind of committed to one or the other? It sounds like you're committed on the gardening side and bonsai will be just a hobby, but can you validate that or kind of talk a little bit about how you made that decision between the two and just kind of go a level deeper into what you were just talking?
Yeah, I was chasing my joy. I knew that I could do gardening and still do bonsai on the side, but I couldn't do it the opposite way around. Like I couldn't make bonsai my profession and still do gardening because I do love both. For me, at least, get into a lot of hobbies and then maybe I'll start like selling some stuff or like selling trees. But there's a time where my hobby feels more like work, and that immediately like kills it for me. So but I haven't had that moment yet with gardening. I say yet like it's gonna happen. I hope it doesn't happen. But I like doing bonsai. I like gardening. When we talk about gardening, we work in the shadows, and we're not usually like in front of a lot of people doing our work. So me becoming a bonsai professional means like traveling around, doing a lot of demos, doing all these things, and I didn't know if I wanted that anymore. But I like doing the gardening. It's hard work, but it's fun.
Yeah, and it's cool to have a very specialist knowledge set, right? That there's probably more, a wider business market for gardening, Japanese gardens than bonsai as well, right? So it probably, can scale more and also, might be easier to get established in. So that's interesting. So I hadn't really thought of that, but yes, you're right that gardening work and bonsai work, or at least the life of a garden professional versus a bonsai professional, probably two very different set of things that you're doing each day. Like, yes, you're working with plants and, there's these aesthetic qualities, but for gardening, typically, whenever somebody's viewing the garden, they're, you're not anywhere there, right? So, and you're not necessarily, you don't have to go into teaching gardening in order to have a career in gardening, right? Whereas in the US, at least with the maturity level that we're at, you kind of do. You can't just sit and do bonsai work and have a business, or it would be difficult, right? Yeah, it's an interesting. So did you kind of look at yourself and go like, hey, I know this and this about myself and I enjoy these things more than this thing, and thus like gardening probably is a good fit for me? Or
there was a time when I was in Texas and Fred had called me. I think this was after the Gafuten trip. I think a month after the trip, we went to Texas for like 4 weeks. Maybe 3 weeks. And sometime in the middle, Fred called me while it was after work, and I was just looking out at the pond and the work that we had did. And Fred called me, and he he said something like someone was asking if I was still going to Japan. And I think it was at that moment I knew like I wanted to do gardening. Like I wanted to make Japanese gardening my profession, and I couldn't commit the same level of dedication to bonsai that I wanted to towards gardening.
That makes sense. Yeah, and like you're not going to go do an apprenticeship in Japan if you're not going to make it a career, right? So
Yeah.
have you ever thought of doing a gardening apprenticeship in Japan then? Like have you thought of like supplemental education at some point with, or how does that go?
Aito-san, I think, was telling me about someone he knew in Kyoto that was looking for apprentices, and I was like, I'd be open to it, but it's a whole different ballgame than the bonsai apprenticeships we know. And I was like, Eto-san, when you come here, it's basically an apprenticeship for me, so I mean, I'm open to it. I'm still open to studying bonsai in Japan, even. Like, I would love to go to Japan for like 3 months and just study and then come back and do work. But I think that's something for the future, not right now.
Yeah, you still got a lot of time. You totally can. Well, I feel like it's hard to, whenever you're doing the thing that you want to do and you're making money doing it and you're learning really rapidly, it's hard to kind of give that up.
Yeah. Jonas was like one of the first people that asked me if I had made up my mind. And he told me, well, if you're thinking that one is something that you have to take a break from, then it's probably the other that you should go to. And I was like, yeah, you're right.
That makes sense. So what kind of synergy is there between Japanese gardening and bonsai? Like, do you feel like they're complementary or,
I'd say in a way, like especially in the pruning side, it definitely helped to know bonsai techniques when going into learning how to prune trees in the garden and plants in the garden in general. But there's a lot of stuff that you still have to unlearn and learn to be able to prune garden trees efficiently and effectively. But
can you give an example? That's something I wonder a lot about. Like, would I be able to go prune a black pine in a landscape since I know how to work on black pine as a bonsai, or is it like two different pursuits?
I mean, the technique is the same, right? Decanneling, pulling needles, it's all the same, but it's done at a much different scale. So if you were to apply bonsai technique to a Niwaki tree, a Niwaki black pine, or like the same techniques you would apply to a bonsai black pine, you'd end up with no tree if you're constantly cutting back to like 2 branches or not pulling enough needles. You're always going to be chasing and fighting the tree. Like there's trees that we've worked on that have been pruned as bonsai for how many years, and we think to ourselves like, this tree's been worked on for how many years, but it doesn't have that refinement or mochikomi that you get when you have when you do the same techniques of bonsai, because it's done at a much bigger scale. So you need to apply techniques that will accommodate to that. So I mean, we'll see stuff on Niwaki black pines that we would consider flaws on bonsai, like spoke branches, 4 branches coming out of one node, things that we would like immediately cut off, but we have to leave or else we would have no tree. So there's a couple nuances, but yeah, definitely having a bonsai background helped when learning these new techniques in Niwaki. So
that makes sense. I'm also curious about, the last few episodes of the podcast, we've had a lot of talks around like the importance of Japanese aesthetics in bonsai. And so, I feel like you're getting a very deep look into Japanese aesthetic through the teachings of your teacher, going to Japan to study, learning with Japanese masters. Like, what's your take or thought on, like, do you have to have an understanding of those, or does having an understanding of those things help inform your bonsai practice and your taste in bonsai as well?
I'd say it does. Because I started in bonsai first, having that ability to focus on such more minute details really helps in the garden. And the aesthetics of both, or the aesthetic goal for both is the same, like natural and refined. So I'm still applying. It's kind of weird. It's like, I don't know how to describe it, but I'm definitely using stuff that I learned in bonsai in gardening and using stuff in gardening and bonsai on the aesthetic side, at least. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. You mentioned kind of the macro scale of the garden for talking about Niwaki, and then kind of the micro scale of bonsai. Do you find yourself like forgetting how to do something on a bonsai after you've done it in a tree in the garden, or like do you have to like reset yourself? Like, oh, wait a second, I can't just go into autopilot. Like I have to be a little bit more, be a little bit different than what I'm doing in my day job.
Not really. Like I'm definitely a lot more focused. Like my focus is probably like tenfold when I'm doing my bonsai, just because when we're working on big trees, we have to get through like 3-4 trees a day sometimes. So it's like we have to be constantly working. So it becomes sort of autopilot. I have to like definitely slow myself down when I go back to doing bonsai. But it's definitely given me a lot more confidence in making cuts on my bonsai trees, though, I'd say.
Yeah, you know, like, hey, if I do this given cut, you have more confidence because you have a better intuition for it's going to look the way that you want, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense. You're going to get the feeling that you want out of the sum of all the cuts that you make. Very cool. That makes sense, I guess. So my question for you though is, with your focus on your core career now and bonsai becoming kind of firmly into the hobby realm for now, like what are your goals for bonsai? Do you have any goals or specific, aspirations within the bonsai sphere as a hobbyist?
I think we share the same goal, is do it at the highest level that we can. Because when people go to study bonsai in Japan, they're obviously going so that they can come back with a greater knowledge. And part of it is becoming a worthy vessel to continue this craft. And I think if there's hobbyists like you and I that, can't really put the time to go and study in Japan, but learn from the people that have, we also play a part in continuing that art form and continuing to see that the quality and level of it improves here in the States. So I'd say that that's my goal right now in bonsai.
And what do you see as the kind of, are there specific particular things that you see as milestones along that goal? Like, are you trying to, have are you just trying to optimize the look of your personal collection? Are you trying to, win some award? Are you trying to, there's all sorts of different goals that are equally valid. But I'm just curious, like, do you, and it's okay to not have these too, but I'm just curious, like, are there things that you think of as like, here's the milestones that I'm going to kind of aim for along my road to getting to a high level of ability?
Yeah, I mean, especially with the Pacific Bonsai Expo being on the West Coast, it's definitely intriguing to try and have your own tree in that show. I was fortunate enough to collab with Fred to have his juniper in that show. To have your own work would be something you've started from scratch would be a really nice challenge. I think that's probably a goal that I have in mind. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense to me because that's my goal too. But so hopefully we'll both be there one day.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I know we'll both be there one day. I have no worries about you, and I'm going to keep trucking until I get there. So, I
believe in you.
Thank you. So I'm curious about, on Instagram, I've never seen your collection in person, but in Instagram I've seen a lot of junipers. So I'm curious, like, is your collection all junipers, or do you have other, is that like a conscious thing, or those are just the trees that you like the most, or you post the most, or I'm just curious about what your collection looks like.
That's funny because I think early on when I first started posting on Instagram, someone had commented like, hey, when are we going to get non-coniferous work on your page? And I'm like, I don't know. But I mean, I have 70 trees in my collection and I post about 5 of them on Instagram. And they all just happen to be, junipers or pine. But I started off, I think for a lot of people starting in bonsai, conifers is just where it's at, right? There's something satisfying about working on conifers because they look like bonsai early on. I think as you start to learn more about bonsai and start to learn what goes into building good bonsai, you get into more of those other species like deciduous trees. So that's kind of where I am at right now. I've been trying to only buy like trident maples because that's like the only thing we could grow here as maple wise. But there's maples in my collection. There's some Elaeagnus. I think that's it.
Oh, that's funny. No, hey, I mean, my collection is almost all conifers, so you're not going to get any hate from me here. I'm curious, like, yeah, San Diego obviously has a very different climate than the Bay Area. You know, so you do feel like you're limited on species. Like, what are the limitations, and then what does really well there?
You know, junipers do really good. But I think without an RO system, it's pretty much impossible to grow good deciduous bonsai material. So having that definitely helps.
So you do have an RO system.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you strip down to like 0 TDS, or are you gutting down to some intermediary value?
I think when I first installed my RO system and tested the water, I think I was at like 20.
Okay.
On the reading. I haven't tested it in like 4 years. So I don't know. I haven't even changed the filter on it. Also, I like add liquid CalMag and stuff to the water, but I don't measure anything. So I kind of just squeeze it in there and
you just look at the trees to see how they're doing.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, that it's like cooking. So you just
well, you're tasting the water.
You just put however much feels good to you. Feels right.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's funny.
It's definitely on the lower side. I don't want people to think I'm like overdosing my trees with CalMag or something. It's definitely on the microdosing side of things.
I mean, to me, that makes sense. Like, probably I haven't looked at your water report, but the listeners are like, oh man, we're going down a water tangent. I promise this will be short, but I'm just interested in this. So probably your water is high in salts, right? Because you're in a pretty arid climate. So it's probably a lot of groundwater. And so there's a lot of like calcium carbonate or something like that in the water, right? And so, maybe it's at 300 or 400 TDS, which I've heard is kind of hard to grow deciduous trees with. And then you strip it down to like 20 or 30 TDS with your filters, and then you add in some calcium and magnesium again, because you're stripping all of that calcium and magnesium out, right? And the alkaline components. So that seems like roughly to make sense. Like the plant's getting all the nutrients it needs, fertilizer plus calcium and magnesium, and it's not overwhelmed by this really high alkaline water.
Yeah, I think that is like our biggest problem down here. I think Southern California in general, our water is just full of salts. So having the RO system really helps if you want to do... I mean, all my trees just look better after I started watering with RO. So, but yeah, if you want to get into deciduous here, it's kind of a must to have the system.
Makes sense. Very cool. But you're still somewhat limited to like tridents and Elaeagnus, like some stuff that does well with more heat and more sun.
So, I mean, we have hornbeams down here also. I have like 3 that are doing okay. I know Julian has a really nice one. I'm trying to think of what else. That's all I could think of.
And are you mostly learning with Fred and Julian nowadays, or like what's your kind of continuing ed on the bonsai side? Like what's your plan for improving?
Yeah, it's mostly just workshops with Julian and Jonas. Those are like the only 2 workshops that I go to. Like I said in the thing we did for the GSBF, Fred and I came up with this deal early on when I still wasn't making my own money, that he'd pay for my workshops with Julian, and in return I would help him do work on his own trees. Cool. But now that I make my own money, I have to pay for my own workshop. So yeah, it's a
double-edged sword. I'm just teasing.
So yeah, those are my 2 main teachers, Julian and Jonas. And Jonas is only pine, so, and then everything else I bring to Julian.
Awesome. Yeah, those are 2 great folks to learn from. Do you feel like you pick up things in bonsai, like concepts and techniques and aesthetics, pretty quickly? Like, I'm just wondering like how you feel your kind of innate ability or biases towards bonsai.
I don't know if it's innate. Like when I first started doing bonsai, I mean, I think that's one of the great like things of starting my Instagram when I first started, is you can literally see my first tree if you scroll all the way down. And it looks like, I almost said a bad word. I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on this podcast. It doesn't look great, but there was a time where I was only working on 5-gallon nanas. I mean, I was going to the nursery and buying like 10 at a time, sell one, and then I could buy 10 more. So that's what repetition practice for me looked like early on. And it was just finding trees in these nanas that were never meant to be bonsai. And I think that's where I was able to learn a lot, because even at this time, I still wasn't a part of a club. I was still learning from the limited numbers of bonsai on YouTube, bonsai videos on YouTube. And I think just working on non-pre-bonsai material really accelerated that learning for me.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean that in any way to minimize where you're at. I guess I was just thinking, hey, you've reached a, like, I would call some of your work like indistinguishable from like a professional level of polish at that like stage of the tree, right? And so, you know, you've clearly been able to get to, you know, I know you want to go higher, but I'm saying like you've gotten to a high level in kind of execution and in a fairly short amount of time. And so I'm just wondering if you kind of have any thoughts on like, you know, like what characteristics or influences have helped you improve quickly. Because, you know, there's people who've been doing bonsai for 30 years and like, you know, maybe wouldn't be able to do the same level of work. And so I'm just wondering if you feel like there's like traits about yourself that make you well disposed or to doing bonsai, or if there's been like influences that you think have especially helped you kind of accelerate.
Growing up, I was a very like creative kid. I was always like drawing or doing something with art. So I think definitely it helped having an artistic background. But I think one of the biggest cheat codes in accelerating your bonsai learning is to go to Japan. I mean, I wanted to ask you about this too, but like when I've only been to Japan twice, once for the Gafuten and then this last February for the Kokufu. And I think each time I came back, I felt that my standard for where I wanted my trees to be was higher. So each time I came back from Japan, I held myself to higher standards. What I thought was good then might be not as good after the fact. So it's always raising that standard and then chasing it is what I see.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if I've gotten that from Japan necessarily. I think because like when I'm appreciating bonsai in Japan, it's often like, hey, here's this tree that's been a bonsai for 20 years. And it's hard for me to connect the like, here's my tree that I've had for 3 years from Yamadori to this thing that's 20 years down the line, right? I think like, yes, I want to aim for that, but I don't necessarily, it's not like clear to me like exactly the like, here's exactly the distance I set the branch from the outer silhouette, and here's exactly the like level of cleaning I do 3 years before I want it to look like this, right? Like those things are hard for me to envision, and so it's hard for me to push myself with just like looking at trees in Japan. I definitely have learned stuff from being in Japan, and I have like, it's inspiring, but I'd say I get more of that from I don't naturally set a like really rigorous standard for myself. Like I'm pretty easygoing. I'm like, it's good enough, you know, like in most of stuff. But so I have to work with people who are really, really disciplined and have a really high standard so that I like that standard becomes the good enough for me. Right. So like I have to, so like that's where I get that like that new standard to chase is from getting corrected by Adam or Sam or Ryan. Right. Like getting those corrections from someone who holds themselves like naturally to a really high standard, I think has helped me kind of have those subsequent milestones to chase.
Yeah.
But I do understand the idea of there's these milestones or these standards that shift over time and go up and up and up. And like you start to unlock almost like in the video game parlance, like these new levels to your trees. Right. And the faster that you can get an understanding and like a muscle memory for that new standard, I think the better that you improve. And it sounds like you kind of discovered that early in your practice, started that ladder of, even though you feel today like there's so much you don't know, it's like you're seeing those subsequent kind of steps up that you can make over time.
Yeah.
And like you've gotten into that path or that cycle of improvement.
Yeah. I mean, some of my trees are just entering refinement. I'm like, this is a whole new playing field for me. I have no idea what to do. So there's definitely still more to learn.
Yeah, I feel that challenge too of like, you know, I don't really learn things until I do it on my own trees and like take them kind of independently to the next level. And, just via nature of being relatively young in the bonsai hobby, it's like I don't have that much stuff that's super far in refinement. And so I haven't gotten appreciation for a lot of that work yet. But, I'm starting to enter that cycle of like, okay, this has been styled, this is 3 years down the road. So it's like, it's got to
For me, it's like,
next level.
I've styled this tree, like 5 different designs, this one tree, like where do I go from there?
That's funny. So I wanted to touch on one thing that you've talked about in some of the GSBF podcasts and things like that, and that's your kind of bring joy philosophy, which I really enjoy. We're gonna have to find some nickname for you, like Matt Kondo or something like that. I don't know, but can you talk to us a little bit more about this kind of how you talk about how you make decisions via what brings joy and like having joy as a center of your kind of practice and process?
Yeah, so I think if I'm remembering correctly, it all started when we were out on a pruning job and I wanted to cut off like a primary branch on a tree. And I think Avram asked me like, well, does it bring you joy to look at it? And I was like, I don't think it does. So he was like, then cut it. There was a time when I was doing like club demos, right? And, people would always ask like, how do you know what to cut? And I think then I never had an answer for them. I was just like, I don't know. Like, you just feels right to cut it. And I guess what was missing from that was that it was joy when you are conflicted about cutting something off or not knowing whether you should cut something off. If you ask yourself if it brings you joy, then like if it doesn't, then obviously something's wrong. And that comes with having, an aesthetic eye for things. But if it feels wrong, then something probably is wrong. So you try to change it as much as you give it a chance. But even after exhausting all the options, if it still doesn't bring you joy, then what's the point? The whole purpose of Tokimeki is like, am I getting immediate joy from this thing that I'm creating? If I'm not, then something is wrong. I should change something, or I'll take a break and come back and look at it. If it still doesn't bring me joy, then it definitely has to change. So this is just something I've applied to my work in both gardening and bonsai, especially when we're setting rocks or building rock walls. It definitely helps in those situations where like something doesn't feel right. I have to change it, and I approach my trees the same way. I think one of the most recent sort of examples of that in my bonsai is my small California juniper. I've had that there was a branch on the tree that I kept that it was the directional branch going off to the left. And for the longest time, I've tried everything. I like extended it, made it longer, brought it in, raised it, lowered it, separated the pads, and it never did anything for me. It always felt wrong. But it was so hard to cut it off because it's such a small California juniper, and you rarely see those, especially with that kind of detail in the deadwood also. So it's like, I don't want to cut this branch off, but I know I have to because it doesn't bring me any joy. So I finally, mustered up the courage to cut it off recently. And it got so much better, I'd say. I was so much more happy looking at it.
I love that attitude. I haven't fully converted to it yet, but I felt like a similar kind of transition for me in my practice has been for the longest time as I was like wiring, or I guess for the longest time as I was doing the styling process, I would know something is wrong, but I wouldn't be able to fix it, right? And in bonsai, you only have so many takes, right? You can't just twist a branch a billion times because it'll die, right?
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to be certain about like, hey, this is wrong. There's one of two ways that maybe, you have to have some certainty about like, what are the actions that you can take to bring joy instead of make it more joyful instead of less joyful, right? In your parlance, I guess. And I felt like that's been a big stone that I've been able to kind of turn over that helps me kind of get to that next level is I'm finally able to notice something's wrong. I almost always like knew something was wrong. It was more like now I have the tools, I feel like, to start adjusting it to be right. And that's been a big milestone for me in terms of like, oh, I can get better because I can finally start to address get some confidence in addressing some of these issues. I don't know, like if you felt like you had like a similar transition in being able to like move to joy more easily, or like bring joy in your, like notice something wrong and then find the joy more easily in your own styling process, or... how that kind of evolution happened for you.
It's not only joy. Like, I'm not only making these decisions whether or not it brings me joy or not, because that would be kind of crazy. There's still, because something could bring me joy and it could be like ugly as heck for all like someone else cares, right? But I think, something Peter brought up in your episode with him was find pictures of trees that you like and study them. And that was something that like I did a lot starting off. It was just saving pictures of trees that I liked. I think, there was a forum on Bonsai Nut like a long time ago, and someone asked like, what's the best way to learn bonsai? And while I also agree that there's no substitute for learning from an experienced professional, looking at pictures was something that people were talking about in that forum was like not the way to go. And I was just thinking like, I think you guys aren't looking at pictures right. I don't think you guys are looking at bonsai pictures the way you're supposed to if you want to study it. So having like a repertoire of trees that I like, that do bring me joy, that I could refer to when I run into similar silhouettes or trunk lines or flaws in a tree, have a bank of pictures that I could look at through to see where or how a professional would have fixed it. And that was sort of one way that I've applied that to my bonsai career.
Very cool. Something I've kind of struggled with though with images is like it's hard to find something that matches your situation exactly, And so I'm wondering how you bridge that gap. Like, do you feel like you do have? I feel like it's hard to like see an image of a tree and then build that same tree, right? Like it's not something you can like templatize, in my mind at least, in the same way as like there's other hobbies where it's like you can literally go and make the exact same thing that somebody else has made, and then you can measure it against theirs, right? But with a living thing, it's kind of hard to do that same process. So I'm wondering if you can kind of connect the dots for me of like how you bridge the picture to your actual tree in your collection, how that bridge happens.
Yeah, it's not like I am copying the entire tree, right? I am looking for specific details in a tree, in a picture that I'm looking at, that resemble something that I'm seeing on my tree. So it could be like, the way the trunk flows is very similar to this. Like, how did the artist frame that specific part of the trunk? Like, where did they place their foliage? How did they place their foliage? And trying to understand why the artist did what they did in certain sections of the tree. So like I could be referencing, multiple pictures of different trees when I'm working on just one tree, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So it's almost like, well, I'm curious, do you feel like it's more or less applicable in deciduous versus conifers? Or because I'm just thinking like the difference between your tree and the final design is probably a longer time period for deciduous than conifers, right? And so, yeah, I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
It's definitely way more applicable to coniferous material. I don't know that much about deciduous trees, so I can't really speak on that. But yeah, the nice thing about trees like junipers and bonsai pines is you can sort of move the branches where you need them to be, as long as you're still keeping good structure. There's more freedom in that design, and yeah,
that makes sense. And I like your outlook on studying being a way to, I mean, obviously studying is a good way to learn something, but it's very cool to hear how you translate these images that you've collected of trees that you enjoy or like you think are well crafted, and how you use them during your design process to understand like, okay, maybe I don't have this exact deadwood feature, but I can see how the artist laid the branch to interact with the deadwood feature, and then I can use that in a similar kind of subsection of my tree.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like everything's the same or everything's different. It can be, you can take like portions of those designs and integrate that into your tree. Are you mostly using like finished trees, photos of finished trees for that process? Or do you also have a bank of like trees in development that you kind of reference?
There's a lot. It ranges from like first stylings to, kokufu trees.
Okay.
I mean, it has like every picture of a bonsai tree you could think of. I think I had saved almost 20,000 pictures on Pinterest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. That's very interesting. Yeah, I'm going to have to incorporate that, I think, more into my practice, because that's something I haven't traditionally been good at. Like I look at trees and books and stuff like that, but I am not often like bringing them out and like having them as a reference during my design process. And I think I could really benefit from doing that. So I think everyone listening could benefit from doing that. So I really appreciate you taking us through kind of that process. Any other tips for folks that might want to involve that more in their bonsai making process?
Get a Pinterest account and start saving those pictures. No, seriously, because I think Pinterest pulls from like every browser or like every language also. So if you just type in bonsai, like you get sources from everywhere.
Now I'll rival my wife's home decor board with my bonsai board. Cool. I'm gonna build one now. I'm gonna make one after this, and I'm gonna start using it. So watch out, everyone.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
I'm still waiting to see my own tree pop up on Pinterest, but I haven't seen it yet. So,
dude, with the fire you've been bringing with your new garden account, I think I don't know. There's gonna be definitely some of those pictures indexed. So that's something I wanted to touch on actually. Can you talk a little bit about? I didn't realize until just today that your new garden Instagram, that's your garden that you're building at your house. Okay. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? Well, first of all, the name and what it means, and then like you're combining your two things, bonsai and gardening. So I'm curious to see like what's the dream there.
So I think this is my first time telling, the public what kosuyen actually means. But before that, I moved in with my grandpa, and this house, I'm fortunate enough to have a larger space for my trees and a big yard to work with. Kosuyen is a combination of sort of my bonsai collection, a garden that I want to build, a hatake or a growing field that I plan to grow niwaki pines in. So the first character, Ko, actually comes from Fred's Japanese name, Akira. And if you study like kanji, you know that each kanji has different ways you can say it, but it's the same. So Ko comes from Fred, like he's played such a pivotal part in this, so it only makes sense to name it after him, right? Sui comes from my boss's Oyakata's gardening company. So it's sort of a thing where, you name your garden or your company after, the place that you learned from. So the name of Eto-san's company in Japan is Suirakuen. And then my boss's, sort of our home base, we call it, is Suigakosha. And then there's my place, Ko Suien. So together, Fred likes to point out this little fact about his kanji character of his name, Akira. There's multiple ways you could actually write Akira, but his is sort of like a rarer version of it, and it means to glisten. Like, I think the original definition is it's hikari or hikaru, and it's just like to be bright, but his version means like to glisten. So kosuyen is a glistening green garden.
That's so cool. Thank you for kind of sharing that with us. Just the first photos you've posted. I mean, I don't know if this was the first big project, but the first one I saw at least was that wall that you built, that I forget the name of the technique, but modeled after the kind of Japanese, like, I know I've seen it on the side of castles and stuff like that.
The yoroibari.
Yoroibari.
So yoroi means like armor.
Okay.
Like samurai armor, and it's meant to represent the cladding that they have like on their armor pieces.
Yes.
Yeah, that was just something. Well, I built that because the fence that encloses like my bonsai trees isn't that tall, and I wanted to build something that would sort of like prevent people from just looking over the fence and seeing all my trees. So I built that for that, but then it ended up just becoming a backdrop. So
it's really, really beautiful. Like, very cool.
It was definitely a learning experience, because there's not like every video I found.
How'd you figure out how to do that?
It was looking at pictures of, I made it a point this last trip to really just like get up close to like the walls of people's houses and take pictures of it. But it's also like on public buildings also. But I was like putting my hand next to it, like getting like making sure I got the proportions right. And there is some videos and like reels, like really short videos of people building it. So I kind of had an idea of how to do it. And plus I I had Avram ask Eto-san like how to do it, so I had some direction starting it, but a lot of it was just I think this is how they do it, so I'm gonna go with it and see how it turns out.
Yeah, it turned out excellent. Everybody who has any kind of aspirations to have a bonsai garden at their home definitely needs to be on the lookout. I'm hoping well, I have to get a house first, and then I'm definitely going to be trying to hire you at some point if I can get the money to do it, because I don't know, it's or finding some way to kind of steal some of these really cool kind of components that you're putting into your garden, because I think it's definitely going to look amazing.
Yeah, I mean, also, we visited Eisei and Kyoto this last trip, and that is such a huge like moment for bonsai in America because like up until then, our idea of bonsai gardens were like cement bricks with some piece of planks or however way we could prop up our trees on a bench. But seeing Eisei and Kyoto opens up so much doors for what a bonsai garden can be.
Yes.
So we're excited about that.
Well, I feel similarly about your approach. Like, there's not a lot of people that are going to have your skill set and are going to be marrying kind of garden design and bonsai. So I'm really excited to see what you do, because I think it's going to open up a lot of ideas and inspiration for folks in the U.S.
I hope so. Like, I'd really love to do a traditional bonsai garden here in the States. It'd be really cool.
Yeah. So what kind of components make a bonsai garden different than a Japanese garden? I mean, obviously they don't have to be Japanese influenced, but I'm saying, like, if you're trying to have a Japanese influenced bonsai garden, how does that change the Japanese garden base aesthetics or function?
The elements are the same. The nobidan, the stone setting, and then of course it has to serve the function of showcasing bonsai. So that's the part where I am still like learning, and I was glad to see Eisei and see what they're doing and how that company decided to showcase his trees. But there's not a lot of aesthetic differences, but there are different types of Japanese gardens that have different functions. So yeah, in a bonsai garden, I would say the bonsai trees are the main show, and then the gardening elements play supporting roles in that. But something in like a tea garden where there's actual roles of the garden in tea ceremony, there's a lot more aesthetic nuances in doing those kinds of gardens that there's just a lot more context into how things are set, where things are set, because it has to follow a certain rule or convention so that it can be used effectively in the tea ceremony.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's like levels to the game in terms of these principles that define like how to showcase bonsai and like the spacing and the number of segments and all these things. Bjorn's garden was really cool. I liked a lot of those. Was there? I haven't seen it in person, just the videos, but I'm curious. You saw it in person?
Yeah, I reached out to him before we left here, so that we could schedule a visit while we were in Kyoto.
Cool. Anything that was like a particular highlight for you, or you're like, oh, I'm stealing that for my design of my garden?
The company that did his place is like really well known, and they did like a really nice job on all the nobidan on the walkways. So I really want to do a nice nobidan at my place. I have the material, I just haven't done it yet. So that might be a later phase, but I have plans for it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's
and you've got time. It'll be really cool to see how your garden takes shape, and definitely going to be talking to you in the future, because I really would love to have a beautiful garden like that at some point in my life. So I'm glad you're blazing the trail. Well, I think there's multiple people who have, like Jeremiah Lee has put together an awesome garden. I'm curious. So how much are you kind of trying to represent San Diego or the US or some other cultural component versus the Japanese aesthetic? And like, how much are you trying to use local materials for the garden design versus Japanese traditional materials? I'm curious, like, where that balance lies for you and your personal taste.
So like, we obviously can't bring like the same kinds of trees that are in Japanese gardens to San Diego and have them do as well as they do in Japan. But there's this concept called Chisan Chisho, and that means locally produced and locally consumed. And it's something that is so like big that Eto-san talks about, because when we're in Texas, It's a whole different set of, rocks, plants that we work with. And it's a whole different environment than Japan. So he's definitely had to look around and see what can work. But I mean, he's just so good that he just makes everything work, I think. But
His process is like trying to find a substitute, or do you have to like reimagine the whole garden and like get the same feeling out of like these different sets of components used in different ways, or like how does that even happen?
It's a little bit of both of that. We'll find things or plants that have similar characteristics to the ones in Japan, and if you apply the same pruning techniques to them, then they definitely do have the same feel. Things like rocks that have very different characteristics is something that he just enjoys because it's a challenge to him to try and make work. And so yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things is just watching Eto-san like look at a rock on the ground and be like, yeah, it's gonna go up like this at the top, this is how we're gonna put it in the wall, and it's gonna fit like this. I'm like, and then it does, and I'm like just in awe every time. Like, it doesn't get old. But yeah, we're definitely adapting the material that we have here to sort of fill that aesthetic sense that it has in Japan. We're trying to imitate it here with the materials that we have local to us.
That makes sense. And I guess are there any materials in your local area that you found that you're really excited about? Like certain kinds of rock, or the wood that you made the wood that you choose, or like any materials that you're excited about that you think have a good future in your garden?
Well, the wood, I think lumber is so expensive these days, so I just chose the cheapest wood I could. But there's a stone quarry, like 20 minutes away from me, that delivered the crusted boulders that I'm using in my garden. And I'm stealing another one of Eto-san's words that he likes to use. But these rocks have a lot of aji, or flavor, to them. So that makes, the walls more interesting. So I'm excited. Like, I started doing the corner of my Kuzure Ishizumi wall this weekend. And, just playing around with the excavator and seeing, like, the different faces of each rock. It's like, oh, this would, like, look really good if I can make this part of the rock work in the wall. So, yeah, I'm excited to, like, if I had to pick one thing in gardening that I like really enjoy doing, it's when we're doing the rock walls, because there's so much, there's engineering to it, there's design aspect to it, and it is a challenge, like figuring out how to fit this rock into a wall, because I think the biggest difference between the rock walls you see in Japan versus the rock walls you see elsewhere is you don't see any mortar in our joints. It's because the rock is placed in a way that it is structurally being supported by the rocks around it and not being held together solely by mortar. Because, everyone could just slap mortar onto something and place the wall and make it float in the mortar. But figuring out how to fit it into the wall is just such a fun process to, one, just experience, but to also just do for yourself. It's so cool.
Those walls are so cool. I love seeing when you post pictures of that. So that the most recent ones you posted were of the wall that you're putting in your own garden.
Yeah.
Cool. That's got to be super exciting.
Yeah, because they're everywhere in Japan. I mean, they're in neighborhoods, specifically the Kuzure walls. It's just something about how bulbous the rocks are, and the overhang of it. It's nice to look at. It brings me a lot of joy looking at these kinds of walls. So I was like, I have to have one in my place. So
that got bumped up the list of this is the next thing I need to prioritize. That's funny.
Yeah.
It's cool hearing you describe I guess the analog in bonsai would maybe be choosing the front of the pot, oh, the features here when you're looking at these little details and just trying to narrow down to which side would better, support the tree or has a cleaner finish. You're doing the same thing with the rocks, right? You're trying to get a uniformity of interest and coolness.
Yeah, there's a lot of the same terminology we use. Shomen is the front of a tree. It's also the front of the rocks we use. Eto-san, he likes the challenge And there's, you know, these super interesting rocks that have like really nice features all the way around. He calls them hapiobijin, which means like an 8-sided beautiful person. Like it's someone that's beautiful from all angles. And he's like, I don't like working with those because it's so easy to put one of those rocks into a garden and have it look good. I want the challenge of, you know, finding something that might only have one side and have
The
that
seven
be the
ugly
focal point.
sided
Yeah.
person. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
It's just the way he thinks is a whole different level.
So I wanted to kind of, as a finishing topic here, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, we had a talk earlier a little bit about shuhari. And I'm probably not even pronouncing that right, but
No, that's right.
one of my listeners actually messaged me and was like, hey, you talked about this a little bit on your podcast with Peter or no, maybe it was even the podcast before that, I think with Julian. And he was like, hey, if you like some of the concepts of like wabi sabi and stuff like that, you might also like to listen to this podcast on the concept of shuhari. So I know that is something that you've kind of discussed deeply with your master. So I'm curious if you could kind of tell us a little bit about what it is and what it means to you and its applicability to bonsai and life.
Yes, shuhari at its most fundamental level is it's split up into 3 words: shu, ha, and ri. Shu means to obey or to follow, and this is referring to sort of the part of your journey where you're learning the basics, and this is where you're imitating your teacher to the T so that you can master these basic rules. It's also the part of the journey where you develop a respect for the traditional craft at its most fundamental level. And then ha means to break. So this is the point where you've mastered the basics and now you are refining your skills through a deeper understanding of the craft. So you not only know what to do, but you at this point you know why you're doing it. And then ri is to detach or to separate. And this is where your work no longer imitates your master. It becomes your own work. It becomes natural. It's no longer an imitation. And this is like where your technique turns into an expression of the artist or the craftsman. And a lot of this, or shuhari, it's not a path, right? It's how do I say this? If we were talking, okay, we're about to go deep. Not that deep, because Japanese culture is super deep, but we'll pull back a layer. I'd say the path that one takes as an artist or a craftsman, it's called shugyo. And shugyo comes from Zen Buddhism, where it's defined as a sort of lifelong commitment to always learning. So another thing that I wanted to point out is, you had your talk with Jeremiah, and Jeremiah, I think on his Instagram a while ago, posted, or he asked the question, what is a shokunin? And a shokunin, just the definition, is a person with a skill or a skill in a craft. But shokunin culture is deeply rooted in Zen Buddhism. And in Zen Buddhism, there isn't really mastery of anything, because mastery implies completion, or that you have nothing left to learn. And shuhari is sort of what, it's an example of that. And Norikyu is a tea master that, is like one of the most influential tea masters in Japan, or in Japanese history, and he sort of shaped the tea ceremony to what it is today. But he became sort of known as the embodiment of shuhari. And and one of his main teachings was that practice takes on a circular nature. So you could imagine the practice of a craft or a skill as a circle from 1 to 10, where you start learning something at 1, which is shu. And then you start to come to know 10, which is ha. And then you use your skills and everything you've learned from 10 to return back to 1. So 10 isn't mastery, it's a way to look at done with the eyes of someone who's experienced 10. And that is shuhari in practice, right? It takes a lot to like understand this and apply it to your craft. And I think, you asked Peter in his episode, do you think it's crucial to know Japanese culture to sort of pursue a higher level of proficiency? And I think you kind of answered it on your own when you're talking about like learning Japanese. Like learning Japanese just opens so much doors to getting better at your craft because you could communicate with so much more people and learn things at their level. And in shuhari is like, it seems like such a profound thing to us, but this is just their mindset, right? Like this is what they think about on a daily basis, or it's the approach that they take. So I think if our goal is to increase the quality of the craft outside of Japan here in the States, then I think it is very beneficial to learn something like shuhari and apply it to your craft.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot we can learn from the culture that's pursued this craft at a really high level, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just the actual techniques, it's actually the mindset as well that helps them drive this whole pursuit, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that. And that's why I'm learning Japanese and going to Japan, and I enjoy the like snippets of Japanese culture that I've encountered too, right? So it's just kind of curiosity for me as well. So I have a few questions about shuhari. One thing that I had also kind of in that podcast that I was listening to, they kind of split it all as well up into like this idea of like mind, body, and soul as like parts of the gates to the learning process. And I don't know if I had one kind of insight into this, so definitely tell me if I'm missing it, but they kind of told a story in the podcast of, hey, somebody started out wanting to be a swordsman and they studied every swordsman there was, and they knew, all this stuff in their mind. But then, they met a teacher and they couldn't fight a single person because they hadn't actually done the like body part. Their body hadn't learned these, how to be a samurai, right? And then, they set off on this journey to then, do this repetitive motion 1,000 times, to build it into their muscle memory. And then there were like essentially like stages to the learning process. And so I'm wondering, like, do your teachers ever tell you about, like, is there that component to shuhari whenever you're learning it as well in your practice of like learning things in your mind, learning things in your body, and then learning things in your soul to be able to like progress through these unique like gates in the learning process? Or is that kind of missing? Is that a little bit separate?
No, I haven't heard the story of the sword thing, but it makes sense, right? If you think about what shuhari is, and especially what shugyo is, it's repetition. It's learning something so that your body knows it, and then to a point where you could do it effortlessly. And I think that's where sort of the mind part and soul part comes in. But there's also this thing called onkochishin, which is to look at past knowledge and gain a new understanding of it through that. I think that's what this swordsman dude was going through, right? There's definitely consequences to leaving, certain stages too early. So like the transition from shu to ha, it's not something that you really decide like it's my time to leave shu, like I'm gonna be in ha. It's probably a collection of moments when you're working where you realize like if I apply the traditional technique here, it's not gonna work, so I have to adapt to that. But if you leave shu too early, that adaptation, it's not adaptation at that point. If you leave shu too early without building a strong foundation, it becomes imitation, right? Or not imitation, improvisation rather than adaptation. And that's dangerous because there's no direction in improv, right? So that's why, it's important when you're in shu you can't really have a personal bias about what you like expect to learn. Like it is just what it is. You have to learn the basics and you have to master these basics before you can leave shu, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's very difficult for like from an American cultural context, right?
Yeah.
Like I think there's definitely some kind of connection between this idea of shuhari and shugyo and like the, in American movie culture and stuff like that, there's always this idea of like, oh, you're gonna have to sweep the floor 1,000 times or like wax on, wax off, Mr. Miyagi kind of thing, right? So
Yeah.
I think those like, that's like the surface level of like this Japanese cultural concept of like learning things. But it's funny that it's so like, I wonder why, is there an analog in the US? Like, I just feel like we don't always like hold that like initial repetition and like dogged pursuit of the basics to the same degree of holiness, I guess, in the US. Or I don't know, what's your take on that?
I don't know. I think everyone wants to be a star here, right? Like everyone wants to have their own variation of something. So it kind of like makes them want to skip shu and like not be a part of it. But then, that's not shugyo. And I think, if you're a hobbyist or if you're doing bonsai as just a hobby, then that's okay if you don't have shugyo. But if you want to, seek a higher level of understanding of the craft, then, maybe it is worth it to dedicate, your life to this practice. Because there's a video on YouTube of an interview of Taiga Urishibata, and they ask him about his apprenticeship, and he describes it as one's own battle. And applying that to everything, like if you don't take that initiative, if you don't drop your personal bias, then you can't grow. Like you have to do these steps in order to, build that foundation. Yeah, it just takes one's own, initiative to do so.
Yeah. I think that was on the podcast I talk about like, hey, I was doing bonsai for 4 or 5 years and I never really improved, right? I think, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I made the commitment to, I guess, kind of that, making that commitment to shugyo, that lifelong commitment to learning and saying like bonsai is something like whether I want to or not, like I'm going to become good at it. Right. And it's like, there's value in like, I should not be afraid to make sacrifices in other areas of my life that, I mean, obviously, that for everyone their own. And like, I'm not saying like leave your family, but I'm just saying like I was afraid, like what was holding me back from improving was like, I didn't want to spend money and I didn't want to, I wanted to have the freedom to travel whenever I wanted. Right. And so like, I think you do have to have your, you don't have to call it shugyo, but you do have to have, if you want to improve at bonsai especially, I think you do have to have that level of commitment because it's just not something you can really casually get good at, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if that's been your experience or not, but like bonsai isn't always convenient, right? And so you need to have some higher overarching commitment level or it's not something that you're going to be able to consistently improve at.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that I've learned just, working with Eto-san and Avram, because they take a very philosophical approach to their work. And seeing the work that they produce, it's like, okay, like, yeah, I should be seeing it the same way they do. They know this at this level because of how they approach it. So, I should make that same effort to understand it the same way they do.
Yeah. I mean, I think we do have, I'm wondering like, what is the, my white collar is showing here, but like, what's the equivalent in the US for craftsmen? Because obviously we have beautifully crafted and created things in the United States too. It's not like we're not like achieving at a high level in various pursuits, right? And so, you hear things like have pride in your work or like things like that. But I'm wondering what the relevant cultural concepts are that power our craft and art industry in the US versus in Japan,
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's something definitely to think about in the future, or like see, because but I do think that the Japanese mindset and approach and like some of the ideas they have are very illuminating and can help you kind of organize and see challenges that are getting in the way of you improving at something. I appreciate you kind of taking us through and talking about your kind of experience and understanding of these things through your really deep and close connection with Japanese culture.
Yeah. I mean, part of sharing the culture or the craft is being a worthy vessel, right? You can't withhold information or else things don't improve. So, I know my My boss loves to talk about it. I love hearing it from him. The more we could spread it to other craftsmen, not only in bonsai or in gardening, but like in all crafts, then, I think we could see that same improvement in the quality of the work here in the States.
Yeah, man, we're going to have a melding of the philosophical minds here at some point. Maybe a team podcast with me, you, Julian, and I don't know, a few of the other folks. But I really enjoy these types of conversations. So I appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything you want to kind of leave folks with? Well, first of all, where can we talked about your garden and stuff like that, but where can they see kind of updates on your practice and connect with you? And then anything you want to kind of leave folks with?
Yeah, you could find me on Instagram, on my bonsai Instagram at bonsai anak, bonsai ANAK, or if you want to follow my garden progress, you can follow me at kousui KOUSUI.EN. You could send me any questions you guys have.
Awesome. So anak is that's Tagalog, or
It is the Tagalog word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it mean brother or?
It means like kid or
child.
son.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I chose it because I started bonsai when I was like 20. I mean, I know other people have started it earlier, but I mean, I just always felt like I was the youngest person in the room.
Yeah, totally.
Wherever I went. So I thought it was fitting.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So do you speak Japanese, English? Do you speak Tagalog as well?
No,
Or?
my Japanese is probably better than my Tagalog.
Okay.
Unfortunately. I wish it was better, but
Yeah, we'll have to do some Japanese practice as well. I mean, yours is much better than mine. I think it's cool that. Do you speak it at work? Does Avram speak Japanese?
Oh, his Japanese is insanely good. I mean, sound like the first time I heard it, I was like, is there a Japanese person in the room with us? But no, I mean, we don't speak it when we're here in San Diego, but when we're in Texas, our client is Japanese. And especially because Eto-san's there, everything is in Japanese.
That's a really cool experience to get.
Yeah, it's nice to be immersed in that. It definitely helps.
Absolutely. Yeah, my brother, he learned Japanese and then worked in sushi restaurants that were all Japanese. It was in Europe, but like all Japanese staff, and
nice.
So that like really helped him learn a lot. So it's always fun going over with him. Well, we'll have to chat some more in the future about going to Japan and kind of different learnings from there. But I really appreciate you taking the time, and yeah, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Maybe episode 200 or something, we'll have the whole episode in Japanese. Good we. Look forward to it. 2030.
What can we say to that? Like, ganbattemasu. Ganbatte. All right. Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, have a good night.